Hey everyone! Today we're going to talk about failure and how negative values can contribute to that. I'm PJ Brady with the Brave Smart Kind Company. I was coaching a leader a while back and she had to go speak at this event. And the theme of the event was this idea that failure doesn't exist. And we've heard that before, right? We've heard failure doesn't exist, it's just life moving you in the right direction. Or failure doesn't exist, it's just your first attempt in learning, right? There are quotes from Edison to Oprah about how failure doesn't exist. And I'd like to share with you a very profound thought that I've had about this notion that failure doesn't exist. Are you ready? Bullshit. Failure absolutely exists. Bigfoot doesn't exist. Failure is very real. And the leaders that I've worked with, we talk about failure all the time. Failure to produce results. Failures in leadership. Failures in teamwork. Failures in relationship. Failures in self. And how else do we know that failure exists? Is because it can cause very real emotional and physical pain. It also has consequence. When people fail, they can lose their jobs. When people fail, they can lose their relationships. When people fail, they can lose their livelihood, their homes. There's very real things that we need to deal with failure. And what happens when people fail, especially really big failures, is they start thinking that they're not worthy enough. They're not good enough. They're not brave, smart, kind enough, right? And they can develop a fear of failure. When people get up on stage to speak in public, sometimes they lose their words. That comes from a fear of failing. Sometimes, have you ever had a leader who suffers from analysis paralysis, right? They just need more information before they can make a choice. They just need more data and data and data. Data, right? And they need so much information to make a choice that they end up not making a choice at all. Now, here's the thing. Not only do I think that failure exists, I say failure is inevitable. Failure is unavoidable, right? What are those things that we say that you can't avoid in life? Death, taxes. I think we need to make space for one more. Failure. If you're trying, you are absolutely going to fail. And that's okay. So once we're able to accept that, say, a failure exists, then we need to be able to overcome it. But it's very hard to overcome if we don't understand why we're failing, especially when we keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. We try to correct them and they never get corrected. Now, what I talk about when I go and do keynotes and workshops is to say that values drive our decision-making process, right? Values help us make those choices in life. So I went in, I was doing this keynote, and there's about 250 people in the room, and I said, all right, here's how we're going to find out your values. We walk through this process of figuring out what their personal values are. And I say, tell me some of the words you came up with. What are some of the things? And people would say things like honesty, determination, intention, loyalty, caring, wisdom, faith, intelligence. There's a long list of values. And I say, all right, now, who wrote down a negative word? Who had a negative value? Nobody raises their hand. But how can that be? Because if we say that values make our decisions, do we ever make bad choices? Of course we make bad choices. And the reason why this is so hard to understand was because what we've been taught is this ridiculous notion that good leaders make their decisions based on their values, and bad leaders, or in poor leadership, they don't. Either they don't have values or they don't make their decisions based on values. And I'll tell you, that is not what I've observed in working with leaders. It confused me for a while, but then I got some help when I was reading a Dr. Seuss book to my daughters. That's not Dr. Seuss, that's the Lorax. And the Lorax asks a very profound question. He says, which way does a tree fall? Think about that for a second. Which way does a tree fall? If your answer is down, good job, you get half a point, right? When a tree falls down, which direction does it fall? It falls whichever way that it leans. A tree falls whichever way that it leans, and so do we. As leaders, what I found is, it's not that leaders don't have values or aren't making their decisions based on their values. I find it's the excess of values that causes people to fail, right? And think about it, when I was doing that workshop and I said, all right, anybody who's had honesty as a value, raise your hand. And they did. I said, all right, for all my honest people in the room, have you ever been accused of being rude? And all the hands stayed up. To the people who have determination, who are determined, Have you ever made a bad choice because you're being stubborn? Anybody who has intention or intentional as a value, have you ever been accused of being manipulative? Or has anybody taken their loyalty too far and put blinders on themselves? They're not able to make the right choices. Of course, I think we've all done these things at certain points. If we look at it in the brave, smart, kind framework, if you take bravery too extreme, you become very reckless. You can become reckless with money, with business choices, with people's hearts, with relationships. What about too smart? If you take smart to an extreme, can that be a bad thing? Absolutely. You can become insufferable know-it-all. We know these people because very often they say, agree to disagree, right? Or they look down at people who they think aren't as smart as they are. What about too kind? Is it possible to be too kind? If you take kindness to an extreme, of course it can be. It's very easy to get taken advantage of, to be walked on, to be considered weak. This absolutely happens, but it's only if we understand these values. It's only if we're able to identify what they are that we understand it. Do our values lead us? Of course our values lead us. And sometimes the place that they lead us is right off a cliff. Right? So if we understand our values, we can understand our failures. And if we understand our failures and where those are coming from, then we get to come up with the strategies to overcome those failures. But if we don't know what they are, if we don't know what our values are, we keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again. You know, many times when I make a mistake, when I recognize that I am in a space where I failed, the first thing I do is I say, which of my values took me to that failure? How do I get myself out? Go back to our two people with our quotes on failure. And here's the thing. Edison, Oprah, geniuses. Incredibly successful people in life. And the reason why they were successful is because they were able to overcome those failures. They recognized them, that they did exist. They saw where they were coming from and they said, this is how we fix that. What's our next step? And look, we're saying the same thing. When they are saying failure doesn't exist and I'm saying it does, it's saying, how do we recognize it? How do we get past it so that we can learn? Right? So we're not going to negate it. We're not going to say it doesn't exist. We're going to say it does exist. Because when we say that it exists, then we're going to be able to learn about resilience. We're going to learn about persistence. We're going to be able to get ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and move on to whatever next success or whatever failure is coming. Keep pushing forward. All right. So in the next session that we're going to talk about is, we're going to talk about how when we're able to recognize that failure, then what? Then how do we use our values to pull ourselves back up? Right. For the meantime, PJ Brady with the Brave Smart Kind Company. We're booking keynotes and workshops now for September, October, November. If anyone's interested, please contact us. Check out the website, bravesmartkind.com. And as always, keep your chin up, keep your brain on, keep your heart open. Talk to you soon.